Hi, I'm Kelly Forshaw-Smith, Head Medical Trainer for the Finishing Touches Group and Director and Technician of Medicos London. And today we have...
Aniela Korabinska.
Aniela's been doing permanent makeup for 16 years. She's based in Dublin, Ireland, and she offers masterclasses, and she will offer more masterclasses in the future. She loves all SPMU, but eyebrows are her favourite. Aniela has won Permanent Makeup Artist, Eyebrow Artist of the Year in 2017 at the MP UK Awards. Aniela's topic today is organic versus inorganic pigments. So welcome, Aniela.
Hello. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Good. And a Happy New Year, we hope.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, for anyone out there, what is the difference? Well, what is an organic pigment and an inorganic pigment?
I think it's very confusing. I was confused about it for years. Used to hear the term and not really know the difference. So it is a bit confusing. Organic, I think everyone automatically thinks, oh, it's better, it's more natural because we relate it all to food, when really it's nothing to do with that at all. It's just the molecular structure. So organic means it's a carbon-based pigment, and inorganic means it's an iron oxide-based pigment. Right. So it's just to do with the colorant that's used in the actual pigment bottles.
What in general is a pigment made up of?
So you've got your colorants, which would be your organics or your inorganic pigments, and then they make a wetting agent. So it would be alcohol, it would be glycerine, some I think have witch hazel in them as well. So that's the very basics of it. Organic pigments, so the carbon-based pigments, tend to be a bit brighter, a bit stronger. They're much watery as well, much more watery. The inorganic, your iron oxide based pigments, are much more earthy tones and much more opaque.
Okay. Do you recommend buying from reputable companies?
100%. There's so many companies out there offering pigments, and permanent makeup has got so huge now. There is a lot of fakes going around. A lot of people buy their products on Amazon and eBay, and you don't really know who the sellers are. I buy from loads of different people myself, different companies for different ranges. But when you're starting out, especially, I think you need to buy from a proper distributor, because you need support, you need advice. Like I would buy from tattoo companies, but if I was a beginner and rang them up and said, oh, I'm having a bit of an issue with this color, what would I do? They'd have no clue. They don't have experts to speak to. So you need the support, you need the advice, and you need to make sure that you're getting a decent pigment.
Because I'm thinking, if I'm correct, they have what's called a micron count, which is the safe amount of particles, and safe micron count, I believe, is 8.
I don't know.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, there was a company, I won't name any names, but this is many years ago. And I heard the horrible story of they found traces of car battery fluid in the pigments. And what was happening is everyone was keloiding wherever the needle went into. So you can imagine a keloid eyeliner is not the best look. And the only way to get that out was to actually have it cut out. So yeah, 100%. Whenever I think of that, I think I'm going to be buying mine. Even if it's a couple of pennies or pounds more, I always buy mine from a reputable company.
That's the thing. And although they might differ in price, really for the amount that we use, it's still a very small payment for your pigment. I would rather pay more for my pigment and be 100% safe. And also for your insurance, you have to show where you're buying it from. They have to have their lot numbers, the expiry date. You have to be 100% positive with who you're getting it from.
You mentioned that you personally buy it. Obviously, you're an experienced technician. You've been doing it for 16 years, which is very impressive, may I add.
Very old.
Do you ever mix the ranges together?
I wouldn't recommend it for a couple of different reasons. One is we're not scientists. We can't say which is safe to mix with what. The pigment companies trial and test all of these colors. The other thing to be aware of as well, with all of the different pigments that are used, there's a light fastness range, which means how long they last in the skin and how they're affected by sunlight and how they fade. Yes. So these companies will often pick the pigments that are on this, that say have the same light fastness scale, so they'll fade at the same rate. If you start mixing different brands, you don't know what's going to happen long term, how the color is going to turn out. You just don't know. And also, again, for insurance, are you covered by insurance if you mix brands? Because we can't tell what the reaction would be. Now, technically, I mean, like clients that I did iron oxide pigments 5 years ago, and now I use carbon-based pigments. The pigments in the skin, I'm putting different pigment in. It is technically mixing in the skin. So technically, I don't know if anything bad would happen, but we can't take that risk. It's not up to us.
No, very good point. So back to organic versus inorganic, which lasts the longest?
Organic, technically, but I've had clients that I've used inorganic pigments on 10 years ago, and it's still quite visible. I think there's just so many contributing factors to it. As a general rule of thumb, and this is general because it's not in all cases, organic pigments, the carbon-based pigments, tend to dull over time and tend to grey. Iron oxide-based pigments, the inorganic, do tend to heal warmer over time, as a rough guideline.
That was going to be one of my questions, actually. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing with it. So you have to take into account so many different factors to how long they're going to last, how deep you've put the pigment in, how much pigment you've put in. I used to do iron oxide pigments and pack in the color. Like, I used to use tons of the pigment. Now I hardly use any. So, but technically, yes, organic will last longer. And I don't know if I said this before or not, the organic versus the inorganic, you do have to be careful. I think anyone who's beginning, I would not recommend to use organic. I would only use organic. It's not very forgiving. You'll see any mistakes that you make. They are going to last longer, so you can't undo it once it's been put in. So any beginners for the first 2-3 years, I would say only use iron oxide pigments.
Why do you think that a lot of the companies are having to stop using inorganic and have to move into organic? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of the brands as well, a lot of the pigments use a mix of the two anyway. They have organic and inorganic in them. So a lot of them have both. I think techniques have changed a lot over the years. I think a lot of the Russians are, sorry, are you there?
Yep, you're back.
I think a lot of the Russians use a lot of lighter techniques, and that's become popular, and the whole powder brow effect and the lightness of it. So I think the organic, which are more watery, you use less of them, so you can use a much lighter technique, whereas the iron oxides, you tend to use a little bit more of the product.
Right.
So I suppose it's just with techniques over the times and then the popularity, I think everyone's had to just move into it.
Because I found personally using the two is the inorganic ones. I used to put out, like when I was doing the consultation, I'd actually put it out and let it air dry slightly, so it got into a thicker consistency. Whereas the organic one, I don't do that. I literally shake, pour in, and then use straight away.
Yeah.
That's
it's so much more.
They are thicker. Okay, get it. Are there any limitations to both?
Well, there's limitations, as in, I think you have to really decide what pigment you're using and what effect you want to have. Like the organic pigments, you really have to use lightly. You cannot pack them in. You cannot work heavy. So there's limitations with that. If you were to put too much organic pigment in, the results could be disastrous. They'll turn very dull, very grey, and you can't get that. That won't lighten over time. That is permanent. So the inorganic, yes, you do need to use more of the pigment, I find, to get a strong result. And I suppose the way I work now, because I've been doing it for so long and I've seen my clients now year upon year or every 2 years, you're always thinking ahead. Now I'm looking properly into the future. I'm thinking 10, 20 years down the line, what do I want? I want to use as little pigment as possible and as less often as possible.
What do you personally use?
Most of my work is carbon-based. So most of my work is organic, but I work very, very lightly now, very lightly. And I used to work very differently, and I used to pack a lot of colour in. So I prefer organic, but you have to take into consideration the age of the client. If I was doing an 18-year-old, do I want to put in this much longer lasting pigment? into the skin. So I think there's definitely a place for inorganics, and also the type of skin, the color of the skin. So if it's a really red, ruddy skin, you know that color, that whatever color you use is probably going to heal quite ashy on that skin. So if I was to use a carbon-based on a really red, ruddy skin, there's a quite high risk that it will turn out quite grey.
Yeah.
So perhaps an inorganic pigment is more suitable to that skin. So I do use both, but the majority is organic.
What would be your top 5 brands then, for which area?
Well, Permablend is definitely my favourite. I've used the Tina Davies and I love them, but I still go back to Permablend all the time. I've used a lot of different ones. Ever After I'm using for lips now, which I do really like. I previously, the iron oxide, I've used LI, I've used so many different brands, so many over the years. But my favourite would be Permablend for organic, Tina Davies for organic. LI were excellent, and I used Finishing Touches for years. Billion Dollar Brown was my favourite.
Oh, I used to love that one.
I know, it was my favourite.
Got truly brunette now.
Yes.
Oh, very good.
But yeah, I've used tons of different ones.
Do you ever dilute your pigments?
You can, and I would advise it, especially for the likes of, if I'm using organic pigments for hair strokes, where you have to worry because you're compacting the colour in quite close. So I do want to use it lighter. So I could sometimes add in a shading solution if I'm doing hair strokes.
Okay, that's very good. And do you find them? I've always found when I first got given the organic pigments, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to like these. I mean, I looked at one of the colour. We've got a colour called Truly Brown, which I use, and I looked at it. I was like, it's green, like in the bottle.
I know.
Green. And it wasn't until I put it onto the client's like forehead, for example, and I literally was like, until eventually it started turning into the colour, and I was like, imagine showing your clients though, this is the colour I'm going to do.
No, I never do.
How do you test yours?
You can do, if you kind of need to know your colours inside out, so you can get glass bottles and put water and a drop in, and you can really see it with the sunlight, the base colours of them. You can get really scientific and actually look at the ingredients and look at the C numbers and know what's in them. But I find that useful. So I know my colours inside out now. So I even know when someone comes in, if they've got ruddy skin, which one I'm going to use. If they've got thinner skin, I know which one I'm going to use. I don't actually go into it with a client. I don't give them the choice because they might not necessarily make the right choice. Yeah. And I also find that the pigments, when you put them on the skin, they start to oxidize. So they start to change colour and it's not the true colour that it is. So I normally get my clients to bring in either a pencil or a powder that they use, so I know the depth of what they want, or if they come in with their eyebrows drawn on the way that they wear them.
Right, okay, that gives them a better idea. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Are they as dark, do you think, like the organic ones, or are they exactly the same? You know, like afterwards they're obviously quite dark, and then you lose 40 to 60%.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between the inorganic and the organic at all, or are they the same?
Yeah, the organic, I find the organic you hold on to about 80 to 90% of the colour. So they're not as intense when they're first done, but you don't lose that much colour. Whereas previously with the iron oxide pigments, the inorganic, they would look a lot darker to begin with, but you would lose a lot more of the colour.
Do you use any kind of, like, I use something called Balm Micro, which is, if I get the organic pigment on the skin, you know, like, you're literally like,
oh, I know. It's awful. I know. Yeah, there's a few different products. There's one called Skinful that I've used. I use green soap that I would get from tattoo suppliers. Yeah. So it's a lot less harsh on the skin.
Yeah, I think the microfoam, I think it's a similar thing. But originally when I was using it, I was just pumping it into, I thought you had to use it direct onto the gauze. And I was like, this stuff's very expensive, you know, you put it into the water that you're using. I was like, oh, okay then. That makes sense. Oh, brilliant. And what recommendations would you give to someone who deciding on which pigment supplier to use?
Pigment supplier, I would do a test on. I would ring a few companies, to be honest, and ask their advice. Tell them the situation you're in. Tell them you're thinking about trying new pigments. What do they recommend? And see the support that you would get. And deciding on whether to use organic or inorganic, I would say if you're a beginner, if it's the first 2-3 years, I would say stick to inorganic iron oxide pigments because they're a lot more forgiving. And until you're truly, truly comfortable with your technique, it's only, to be honest, for me, it's only been the last, say, 3 years that when your client comes in for their treatment and then you look at their photos that you did a year ago, I used to cringe and go, oh my God, is that what I did? And if I was using organic pigments back then, there would be nothing I could do. So the inorganic will fade a lot more. So I would say if you're not totally confident in your work, stick with inorganic pigments. If you're totally happy with your treatment, then go organic.
I guess also price-wise as well, to a certain degree, that is, if you're wanting to see your customer on a more regular basis, so maybe, again, that might be a criteria of the type of client that you've got, who, I don't know, maybe keeps having different kinds of surgeries and stuff. So, their eyeliner ends up like up here or down here, which is obviously not good. But at least you'll be able to add or change things more regularly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What tips can you give me, top tips can you give me for using organic and then inorganic?
For organic, it's definitely the less you use, the better. They look a lot warmer. So when you actually work on somebody's skin, they look really red. And I always pre-warn my clients before I've even begun the procedure when I'm using organic pigments is your eyebrows, you're going to think I've given you ginger eyebrows when I've finished. A lot of the redness is because the color is a bit more sheer and I work lighter, you can see a lot of the redness in the skin coming through. So organic, work light, don't use a lot of the pigment, and then do it a lot less often on the client. Inorganic, you have to find the right brand. Yeah, there's a lot of inorganic ranges out there, and again, like, reach out. I reached out to loads of people in the industry and I contacted them and asked them what pigments they used and what they recommended. Rather than going to a salesperson, ask the people that you admire or the people you follow on Instagram, ask what they use and try those brands out.
That's brilliant. Okay, I'm thinking off the top of my head here, who are your top other technicians that you follow and like for eyes, brows and lips?
Oh, there's loads. There is loads. I think, well, there's so many foreign artists that I will not be able to pronounce their name. But UK, I think I've got some of the best out there as well. There is my ultimate favourites, and I feel like they are almost like the original supermodels of the permanent makeup world. There's Miriam Grice, there's Elaine Campion, there's Courtney Stevens. Monica Vanni is just an inspirational person. She's so inspiring and motivated. So I love Elaine Campion's eyebrows. I was actually meant to fly over to her in March to have mine done, so it got cancelled. Courtney Stevens is the best for eyeliner in the world. And then Miriam Grice I've been a fan of since the very beginning. There's loads. There's so many.
I love it. That's good because I've pretty much got all of them to interview after you.
Oh, nice.
That's good. We're on the right road here. Oh, that's lovely. Aniela, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really helpful, and I hope it's helped someone out there who's either trying to do the transition from inorganic to organic or not sure when they're beginning of what they're starting with. So I think it's really helped with everybody. So if anyone has any questions, then you can write below, comment below, and we will try to get back to you as soon as we can.
And also you can message, if anyone needs to message me, a few technicians have over the years, likewise I've messaged others. I think the community is so nice and it is quite small. Everyone's willing to help. So if there's anything you need to ask me for advice, feel free to message.
Yeah, and also forums as well. So yeah, please let us know if we can help you. Okay, well, thanks, Aniela. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Take care. See you later. Bye.
Bye.